All right, we are live. Finally, I am not Mark Booth. People that are tuning in right at the start of this are like, "Where did Mark Booth go?" Unfortunately, I am now the face of these live streams for a little while. I don't know if that's gonna hurt or help the viewership, but we'll find out fairly quickly. Welcome, friends, to the Canvas live stream. We've got so many people jumping online right now, joining us live today for what's sure to be a great session with Paris, one of my favorites trainers over on our learning service team. And this one's going to be a good one because we're going to talk about creating your pathway of learning specifically in Canvas modules, which I'm super excited about because it is, Paris will tell you, one of the big support topics, right? On filtering modules, kind of finding out how to use them correctly, and best practices. So Paris, it's your time to shine. Take it away.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to talk about I'm going to demonstrate some different examples of modules, both K-12 as well as some higher ed module examples. And we'll also talk about some common questions and some common issues that people run into when they're creating and designing out their modules and some little best practices and whatnot. So let me go ahead and hop over here into my course. So just kind of demonstrating a couple different modules. And something that is actually really cool you can do with modules is typically people think modules and they say, okay, like put my lesson plan in there. But you can do a lot of really cool things. You don't have to just only use your modules for your lesson plans. Sorry, excuse me. So a really big thing that I like that a lot of people do at the K-12 level, especially with everything being online learning and people kind of getting used to Canvas still, a lot of times you'll see teachers create modules for the parents. So I have an example here up at the top of my parent resources module. So when you're creating and building out your modules, especially at the K-12 level, think of kind of creating additional modules. Even at the higher ed level, you'll see a lot of people create modules for even student resources, how it is you can access the help desk, or any local school resources. So you have those additional resources in your course. Even sometimes at the beginning of the school year, you'll see instructors create kind of a, hey, here's your introduction to your class. Here's who your teacher is. So your modules don't only have to be for your lesson plans. You can do a lot more kind of creative things with that. But so this first example up here, we have our parent resources. You'll also notice I have emojis. That's something that's really popular at the K-12 level. And you can also use those emojis as well to help kind of add a little pizzazz to your modules, but also kind of help with that organization and making it visually easier to look at, especially for your students, because you don't typically just want to create a big wall of just, hey, here's all your assignments. You can do a lot of really cool things to actually organize out your modules. So in this example over here, I have something called text headers, and I'll demonstrate how it is you can create a text header in a moment. But in this example, we have text headers to break out each day of the week. So instead of the student coming to their module for the week and seeing a huge list of things, it's actually now broken up into kind of little subtopics. So you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but you could do that same thing days of the week. You could do, hey, here's the homework, maybe resources, quizzes that need to be completed for the week. So you can really do a lot of extra organization options in your modules area. And then in the example that I have here, little bit difficult to tell right off the bat, but you'll notice that I have my Monday. So you can also do indentation as well with your modules. So with Monday, everything's basically pretty flush over here. But as Tuesday goes on, you'll see that I've added some indentation over here. So with your modules, you do have the ability to increase and decrease your indentation. So if you kind of want to have think of like a ladder or kind of a cascading style effect as your students navigate through their modules, just to kind of help with that visual breakup, because it's going to be much more digestible for your students when they come into their modules area and see, okay, this is what I need to make sure that I accomplish for today or for this week or for this lesson, this chapter. Having it all kind of broken up does make that much easier on your students. So this is kind of another one of those K-12 examples here. And let me go ahead and fix my indentation so that one's not just out there. But as you can see, it's actually quite easy to change the indentation. All you have to do is click on those little 3 dots when you have your module items in there, and you can either increase or decrease. But you can also actually, as you are adding items to your modules, so if I wanted to add something, you do have the ability, as you are adding content to your modules, you can actually change the indentation right then and there. But you can always add it to your module, see how it looks, and then change the indentation before or after. There's not necessarily a wrong or right way to do so. You can do either or. So K-12 example, and let me refresh because I have added a couple more in here. Perfect. And then a little bit further down, I have some more kind of higher ed examples here in my module. So I have kind of more of a topic-based module. So in here, I have a couple items in here, but if I wanted to kind of organize this out a little bit better, I could come up here to the top with my little plus sign. And then I could add a text header to help break those things up. So if I wanted to have maybe resources, well, we have links and resources, so we'll say pages. So I could add a header for pages, and then whenever you're adding items to your modules, especially things like text headers, they'll come in unpublished. So you will want to make sure that you publish that so then it's actually visible to your students. But from here, if I wanted to put any of those page relevant items, I could then just drag and drop that under that now subheading that I have. And if there's any maybe homework it is that they need to complete, and go ahead and create a header for homework. And then organize anything else however I want to. If I want to add some indentation, I could add some indentation here. And just make that a little bit visually easier to see. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with your modules in terms of organization. If at any point you want to do things like emojis in your modules, and I mentioned earlier, it's really popular at the K-12 level. You could definitely do it at the higher ed level too. It's an option. But if you wanted to do things like emojis, I actually have a website that I love for emojis. So we'll just snag one of these. So
Paris, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but what website do you use for kind of snagging these emojis?
So I use Emojipedia. I really like that one because I can come over here and I can just search a term. So if I was looking for, let's say, fruit, I search fruit and it'll give me any emojis that pertain to fruit. So then it's a really fun way to add pizzazz to your module area.
Love that.
So like you could even add that in your text headers as well. So if I wanted to, I was creating my text header, add that emoji in there, I could just copy it from the website, paste it. So that way you don't have to have a keyboard all ready to go with all your emojis. You can just go to that website, search for what it is that you want, and then add it into your modules area. And now you have a cute little homework smiley face over there.
Paris, can you talk a little bit about why you believe, is there a design element to using emojis that is just kind of a best practice, or like you said, really kind of a lower elementary grade level, they kind of love the use of emojis? Talking about organizing content. I know when I used Canvas, my best, one of the best practices was always, is there a way to use emojis to organize or use the text headers to kind of show, okay, my resources would be a book, or if it was a quiz, I'd use a special emoji. Because I know Canvas kind of has their built-in icons over to the left-hand side. But if there's just something a little bit extra, like, can you talk about your experience with working with districts on kind of how you approach using emojis in the module a little bit?
Yeah, so one that I really like to use, so especially when there's kind of, because sometimes with in your modules, your students, especially younger grade levels, might not know exactly where to stop. So you could actually use like the little stop sign emoji, and then put that in kind of as the ending point. So you can really start to teach your students like, hey, this emoji means this thing. So when you reach the stop sign, that's when you know that you're done for the day through navigating through that module content. You can have like the little starting flag for the beginning of the module, or even like a little sunshine. You can do a lot of different things, but the biggest thing is if you're going to use emojis, you'll want to have somewhat of a consistency. as you're navigating through those things. Especially I've seen like during the holidays, they might have like or Halloween, they might have a specific Halloween module. So then you can add your little Halloween emojis just to make it a little bit more fun.
I love it.
The biggest thing is if you're going to use emojis and you want to use those emojis to kind of signify things, you'll want to make sure that you have consistency across the board. So that way it's not the puppy dog one day and then strawberries the next. And the student's like, I don't know. It's just a bunch of icons.
Right. I love it.
So consistency would definitely be the biggest thing I would recommend. There's a lot of fun ways that you can really add, but yeah, emojis are definitely my favorite way to kind of add a fun visualization. But yeah, keep consistency across the icons. You have a lot of like the textbook ones. You could use apples and things for quizzes. A lot of fun stuff that you can do with the emojis. But yeah, I definitely like the Emojipedia website.
Big fan here. And Starry and Blake here from our Periscope feed just kind of commented on the post here that said, one of my teams loves using emojis to identify major grades for tests and quizzes for the gradebook. So another great tip.
That's awesome. So a lot of fun stuff you can do in terms of adding content or adding more visual content to your modules. So now I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the common things that people run into issue-wise. So we talked a little bit about some of the different organization options that you would have. Another really big one that we see all the time in support is how do I add links to external resources? Because the really cool thing and a big value of modules is, and I like to call it your pathway of learning, because you're really building out the pathway that students are going to be taking through your course content. So with that, let's say there's maybe a resource that's maybe not in Canvas that you want to add to your modules because it might be of a big benefit to your students. You can actually really easily add content to your modules that maybe don't exist within Canvas. So to do so, we have our little plus sign over here on the far right. I can click that. So just as if I was adding my text header, but instead of text header, I'm going to use the external URL option. And then it's going to give me a couple boxes then that I now need to fill in. So the first thing it's going to do is ask me for a URL. So it might be a silly thing, but a lot of times people will see the word URL and have no idea what that means. So your URL or the URL is just going to be the address, what is found in your address bar when you're wanting to go to like a website. So if I wanted to send my students, because maybe it was Science Week or Space Week, and maybe I wanted to send them to the NASA Kids Club website so they could do some of the activities there, what I would do is I can pop over here to the website, maybe find what it is that I want to use. Or if it's this page, I could just simply come up to my address bar, highlight, and copy. Then pop back over here to my modules area, and then I'm going to paste my URL here. But now I want to make sure I give it a name as well, because I don't want my module to show up with this long URL just because it's really clunky looking. It's not visually as friendly to look at. And if a screen reader were to go over that, that would be absolutely chaos, just having it read off that whole URL. So instead, we'll want to make sure that we input the page name of what it is we want that to say. So we'll say this is the NASA Kids Club. Oops. I did not finish typing and I hit enter. There we go. It's down here. NASA Kids Club website. And then update. And then you'll notice because when I added it, it's a new link. It's going to come through not published. So another really common thing that people run into issues all the time with modules, like this would definitely be top 5 questions all together in support, is why can't my students see things? Publishing. Draft state in Canvas can cause a lot of issues just because people forget that things aren't always automatically published. So if I did want my students to see this, I would just need to make sure that I publish that, and then I could move this to wherever it is that I wanted to move that item into my module by click and drag, or you could always use the options over here, 3 dots, and then move to. So you can move it 2 different ways. I prefer the drag and drop way, but it's nice to know you have options. So that is how it is that you can add an external URL. You also do have the option when you're adding your external URL, if you don't want it to open up in Canvas, you can have it open up in a new tab. So you do have that option as well if you want them to kind of like be able to go into Canvas, but then open up that NASA website in a different website. That way it's not trying to iframe within Canvas. Also, some websites don't iframe very well within Canvas. So I typically, when it's external, I like to load it in a new tab. So just something to kind of think about. And that's mostly because some browser settings, they don't like to load that content. That's not so much a Canvas thing. Chrome and Firefox likes to do that a lot. That was another thing we'd get questions about back when I was in support. So I like to opt to load in a new tab when it is an external website, but you kind of have options there as well. So, and then talked a little bit about how it is that you can add an external resource. Another really common misconception with modules is, let's say you decided you wanted to remove something from your module because maybe you're like, hey, we're not going to be using I always open a new tab. I want students to always have Canvas instance open and not getting covered up. Smart. Yeah, I like that option as well, because then you just have two separate areas.
Right. Yeah. Who would have thought the second half of the Canvas casters would come into the live stream today? Never in my wildest dreams did I find Marcus to be on our live stream. Marcus, thanks for joining us, buddy. We really appreciate it. But yeah, and I think I was always that way too, right? I wanted students to always have Canvas open so they could come back to it and not covered up on a lot of those things. I think that's a super helpful tip. And if you're not using that, I'd encourage you to try it. It definitely, it keeps kids there, right? And they can always go back, right? That's the thing people worry about, but then they'll get lost. I think we might worry about that with little learners, but you know, in my experience, high school, and I know, you know, some middle school experience as well, it was always easier that way. But I think there's probably an argument as they get younger in age in our classrooms, they might get a little lost. So yeah, absolutely. I love that.
So another really common thing is, a lot of times you might go through your module and say, okay, we are actually not going to be using this 9.1 writing resources. So what will happen is a teacher will come in here and then they will hit the remove button, this little trash can over here. And while this will remove it from the module, it will not remove it from the course. So if you did want to entirely remove something from your module and your course, you could actually instead go over to your assignments page and delete it from there. So, because what happens a lot is an instructor will remove it from the module and they'll say like, why is it my students are still completing this? It's not in the module anymore. Well, they may have gone to the assignments page and been like, oh, there's a 9.1 over here. Don't know why it's not in the module, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because it's in my class. So best practice, make sure if you're removing things from your module and you want it entirely out of your class, you can just remove that assignment, that discussion, that quiz, that page, whatever it might be, from the actual pages tab or the assignments tab, the discussions tab. And if you delete it over there, it will just remove it from your module for you. That way you don't have to worry about doing it twice. So something to kind of keep in mind. Also, another really common thing as well is a lot of times people will come over into their modules and maybe they're wanting to add duplicates of assignments. So if I come through here and I want to add, maybe we'll add our 9.5 and add item. So we added it and it's down here at the bottom. So our 9.5, it's also up here. So a lot of times people will add that thinking it's making a copy, but you're just adding that same item into your module. So if you do want to make a copy of something, you'll want to make a copy of that from the assignments page so then you have an actual copy, not just putting the same thing in your module twice. Because if you put it in your module twice, then it's just there twice. So you will want to make sure, if you're wanting to make actual copies of things in your module area, make your copy from your assignments page, especially if it's a duplicate assignment that you might be using multiple times. Duplicate it from there. That way you're getting actual duplications instead of just, placing it in there multiple times. That's also a really common thing that support's been seeing a lot in their support tickets. Yeah,
Paris, lots of love for Marcus, obviously. He's a huge fan. He says, if I could send a GIF, it would be applause. So you're doing a fantastic job. Keep it up. Love it. This is all great stuff.
So, and then the other one is, why can't students see my modules? This one is absolutely huge. This is a really common thing, and it's easy to miss. So a lot of times, if you are ever in Canvas, and so one big indicator you might notice in your courses, so you'll notice up here at my announcements, I have this little crossed out eyeball. If you're ever in your modules tab and you notice that crossed out eyeball and you have content in your modules, it's likely you have your modules in there, everything's set up, but you may just not have modules that are published. So with your modules, because you'll notice here with parent resources, everything in my module is published. It's ready to go. However, the module itself is not published. So when a module is not published, even if the content in there is published, the module overall and all the stuff in there is going to be locked away. I kind of like to think of modules as like a treasure chest. Like, you might know that there's gold and stuff in there, but if you don't have the key and it's locked, then you're just kind of like, okay, I can't access it. So big thing is always make sure when you're going through your course, make sure your modules are published. And you'll notice that little happy green check mark up at the top of your screen when it is published. So good rule of thumb when you're like, okay, everything's in here. Modules, make sure your modules are published. Granted, you might have modules that you publish kind of as you go, and that's also entirely fine. But you do want to make sure anything you want to be visible to your students, you have that happy little green check mark letting you know that's published, it's ready to go. Also, we've recently updated Student View. Before, you used to have to go to either homepage or settings, but now it's super easy to be anywhere in Canvas and say, okay, I wonder if students can see this. Is this accessible to people? You can always pop up to the top, hit Student View, and then get an idea of what your course looks like for your students so you can see what it is that they're going to see as they navigate through your course. So Student View, awesome resource, probably one of my favorite tools that instructors have access to in Canvas, because it's a great way to kind of go through everything, make sure everything works. And it's also a very great preventative measure. So that way you don't have to worry about students being like, why can't I see this thing? Parents saying, why can't we see this thing? What is going on? What is Canvas doing? Always check Student View, make sure that they can see the resources. You can even, in Student View, if you wanted to take your quizzes, submit to your assignments, respond to discussions, just to kind of see how that works, you can do that in Student View as well. And fun fact, it'll give you a test student in your grade book that then you can have someone to practice kind of calculating out grades with. So if you ever are like, hey, I wonder how this calculates, boom, test student.
We had a great comment come in on the YouTube channel. So students can see the resources, but not enter if module is unpublished, question mark.
Yes. So if there's resources that are published, but the module itself is not published, the students will actually get a little message that says, hey, this item is in a unpublished module. So they'll know of its existence, but they'll get that message telling them, hey, it's in an unpublished module. And students sometimes might not know that terminology. Like, they're like, what's unpublished? Like, why is it unpublished? So higher ed students will typically contact Canvas support. K-12 students will usually be like, hey, to their parents, to their teachers, and be like, why can't I access this?
Right. Well, the comments are rolling in. So Laura from LinkedIn asks, she loves the idea of opening external URLs in a new tab. Is there a way to make that happen if external link is embedded on the page?
You might be able to do something like that with HTML.
Right.
I actually haven't personally tried that. But with the HTML editor, you can do a lot of different things if you're HTML savvy.
Yeah, I agree. And I might hunt down that resource while you kind of finish up here. And I definitely love that idea of doing it inside or embedded on a page. So let's see if I can track that down for you, Laura. Thanks for the question.
And another common thing that support has been seeing a lot of lately when it comes to your modules is, so your modules are meant to be a digestible way for students to kind of go into their lesson, see what it is that they need to do. Something that has been a little bit more of a trend lately is we've been seeing a lot of people add multiple items to their modules. And when I say multiple, I mean like 200 items. 200 is where it kind of caps out. So while you might have a lot of content in your modules, it's kind of important to think of, if you have that much content in your modules, you might want to consider breaking that up into kind of more sub modules, so it's not all in one big massive module. 200 items in one single module is really hard to navigate, no matter how many emojis you maybe add to break those things up. So you might want to consider breaking those up into just separate modules. Also, students on iOS, Android devices, if they're using Canvas on that, then they're kind of putting them through the scroll of doom. So you do want to make sure that you're keeping your modules still digestible and not reaching the threshold of 200 plus items in your module.
Right. I love that. And the power of the Canvas community, right? I talk a lot about it in a lot of different formats, but it's always somebody's got a question and everybody else has either attempted it or has a solution. So I love Danica from Facebook saying forcing a link to open on a new page with Control K on it as a keyboard shortcut is a really great idea. Also from YouTube, Andres, I hope I'm saying that correctly, or it could be Andres with an iframe, but beware with copyrights. So another great comment that came in. There is a Canvas community article. The Canvas community is a big wealth of knowledge for our users that are, I always find my way to the Canvas community by just Googling something, but it's a great place to go to kind of find tips and tricks. And there is a great open question that has been solved about how to open links in new tabs. So if you just do a quick search on Google, it'll get you the Canvas community. Unfortunately, I can't send that link directly to LinkedIn from our platform. We need to check on that because there shouldn't be any reason why I can't do that. And I might just pop over and do it, kind of force it myself. But that's great. And I love the comments coming in to help each other out because the Canvas community always does that, right? We're always here to help, which I love.
Yep. I love it. Well, but that's basically all that I have today. If I unpublish, can I unpublish a finished quiz? If not, how to hide a finished quiz. So once a student actually takes a quiz, you won't be able to quiz, assignment, discussion. Once there's student responses or submissions on an item, you won't be able to necessarily unpublish it. But what you can do is you could use the availability dates if you wanted to kind of make that so they couldn't participate in it. Or if you didn't want them to be able to access it whatsoever, at that point, you could throw it in a unpublished module and kind of lock it away from them that way. That would be another option. So you can use unpublished modules to your advantage.
Awesome. I love it. Paris, I promised this was going to be a great session. She's the absolute best, right? One of our fantastic trainers, one of our dedicated trainers on the learning services team. They all do an absolute fantastic job. Shameless plug. If your district is ever interested in having some dedicated training for your schools, do not hesitate to reach out to the learning services department or your CSM. Get access to some of the great trainers just like Paris. I appreciate you so much for being on the podcast today. Oh, I said podcast. I knew I was going to screw up on our live streams. I promise this is not a podcast. We just want to thank you for everything you've done. And thank you to all of our viewers today for stopping by and commenting, learning something new with us. And we look forward to the next one. As always, keep adapting, keep learning, and keep educating.